Hi there, I'm Emily Katz, an assistant professor of philosophy at Michigan State University. So I don't know about you, but lately I've been thinking even more than usual about my friends and my loved ones. It's been hard to have to be apart from them, and it's made me reflect on the importance of love and friendship. So I thought for this series it might be timely to discuss some of the things that Plato and Aristotle have to say about friendship. I'm going to do a sort of Q&A with Plato and Aristotle on friendship, drawing on somewhat more Aristotle than Plato. I'll keep it short, but I hope that you'll use this as a kind of starting point to keep thinking about these questions and about how you would try to answer them. So I'm going to draw mostly on Plato's Lysis and Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, books 8 and 9. Before I get started with the Q&A, please take a minute to just pause the video and write down the names of 5 friends. So these can be family members, they can be romantic partners, and they don't all have to be your closest friends, just the names of 5 people that you would consider friends. This is going to help to anchor the discussion, and I'm going to refer to this activity as we go along, so I really encourage you to take a few minutes to do this. Just pause the video, and when you're done with your list, then start the video again. So let's start with the most basic question. What is friendship? In the Lysis, Plato has a young boy suggest that 2 people are friends when one of them loves the other. But Plato then has Socrates point out that there's a problem with this. If you love somebody, but they dislike you, then neither one of you can really say that you two are friends. Still, the boy's onto something, because friendship is some kind of relationship that involves some kind of love. In Nicomachean Ethics 8.2, Aristotle writes that the kind of love involved in friendship is something that he calls goodwill, which is basically wishing good things for the other person. But of course, this isn't yet sufficient for friendship, because you might feel a lot of goodwill toward a public figure or a celebrity, but we wouldn't say that you two are friends just because of that. So the goodwill has to be reciprocated. That is, you feel it for them and they feel it for you. And then another condition is that it has to be recognized. So you both have to be aware of this mutual goodwill that you feel toward one another. So if you and I wish good things for one another, and if we're both aware of this mutual goodwill, then, according to Aristotle, we're friends. Or as Aristotle puts it, friendship is recognized reciprocal goodwill. So what do you think of this definition? Would you change anything about it? One way to think about whether or not you would change anything about it is to ask yourself a question like this. Are there any relationships that I can think of that fit this definition, but that I don't really think are friendships? Maybe people that you didn't put on that list of friends that you made earlier. If so, then maybe another condition needs to be added to the definition, or some of the existing conditions need to be modified in some way. Another question you can ask yourself is you can have a look at your list of friends, and you can ask whether Aristotle's definition of friendship as recognized reciprocal goodwill covers everyone on your list. If the definition excludes anyone who's on your list, then maybe, again, some condition of the definition of friendship needs to be removed or changed. So, for example, a good friend of mine maintains that Plato is her best friend. But of course, she and Plato don't have recognized reciprocal goodwill for a variety of obvious reasons. So maybe that's a good reason to consider revising Aristotle's definition of friendship. Okay, time for our second question. Let's say friendship is recognized reciprocal goodwill. That still leaves a bunch of questions. And the next one is, are there different kinds of friendship, different kinds of recognized reciprocal goodwill? So Aristotle maintains that you can have goodwill toward another person either because of their utility, because they give you pleasure, or because they are good. So he concludes that there are 3 kinds of friendship. Friendships of utility, friendships of pleasure, and friendships of goodness. So I'm going to unpack each of these in turn. And we'll start with friendships of utility. So in such a friendship, you and your friend have goodwill to one another because each of you is useful to the other. Each of you has something that the other needs or wants. So let's say, for example, you're really good at chemistry and a classmate of yours is really good at mathematics. So you decide to become study partners. You'll explain chemistry to her and she'll explain mathematics to you. As a result of this, you spend a lot of time together and you develop goodwill and respect toward each other because of what you can help each other with. So have a look at your list of friends and ask yourself, are there any people on this list who fall into this category of utility friendship? Someone I spend time together with and feel goodwill toward because they somehow have something that I need or want. If there isn't anyone on your list who falls into this category, maybe just think, well, are there other people who fall into this category who I know, but who I didn't include on my list? This brings us to the next kind of friendship based on pleasure. In such a friendship, you and the other person have goodwill toward one another because you give each other pleasure. Basically, you have a good time together. So maybe the other person's really funny and makes you laugh, and maybe you're really adventurous and fun to do things with. So you two might become friends because you find a good laugh pleasant, and she finds it pleasant to do adventurous things with a companion. So if you have a look at your own list of friends, are there any on there who you'd say are pleasure friends? People you're friends with because they're just a lot of fun to be with. Before I move on to talking about the third kind of friendship, I should note that these two kinds of friendships that I've talked about can mix. So you can be friends with someone for pleasure, and he can be friends with you for utility. So this might describe a good mentoring friendship, for example. The mentee finds it useful to learn from his mentor, and she takes pleasure from mentoring him and seeing him learn. Okay, so on to the last kind of friendship based on goodness. In this kind of friendship, you and your friend have goodwill toward one another because each of you is a good person. And since what you love about the other person is her goodness, her good character, you love her for her own sake. Aristotle maintains that friendships based on goodness will also be useful and pleasant because two good people are always pleasant and useful to each other. And Plato shows us in the Phaedrus and the Symposium that the most intimate kind of relationship can help both parties to become better and wiser. So is there anyone on your list of friends who's this kind of friend? Someone you love just because of the good person she is, and who loves you just because of the good person that you are. Aristotle would say that this is your truest friend. And here's something for you to think about later. Do you think that there are any other kinds of friendship besides these three? Are there people on your list of friends who don't fit into any of these three kinds, even if you kind of mix them together? So if there are some people on your list who don't fit into any of these three kinds of friendship, how would you characterize the friendship that you have with these people? So this brings us to our third question. Let's say we have these three kinds of friendship. Are any of these kinds of friendship better than the others? Well, Aristotle's answer is that only friendship based on goodness is friendship in the truest sense, and he calls this complete friendship. Goodness friendships are the most lasting because they're based on each friend's character, and character is something stable and lasting. Aristotle argues that utility friendships dissolve as soon as one or both of the friends is no longer useful to the other. So to go back to my study partner example, when the semester's over, you and your friend are going to have less need of one another because you don't need as much help from one another when classes are done. And so you have less reason to get together, and so your friendship may kind of peter out over the course of the summer. And then as for pleasure friendships, these are going to dissolve when one or both of the friends stops being pleasant for the other. So returning to my example of this kind of friendship, let's say you injure yourself and can no longer do fun, adventurous things. Well, then you and your friend are going to stop doing so many things together, and the friendship again might kind of fade away. Okay, so just because friendships based on goodness are the truest and most enduring, does this mean that you should strive to only have friends of goodness? Well, Aristotle and Plato both characterize the highest kind of friendship as something very intimate that you can only have with very few people. It takes a long time to get to know someone well enough to know their full character. And also to maintain such a friendship, you have to spend a lot of time with the other person. Since you only have so much time to spend, you can only have very few such intimate friends. So you can't really have a lot of friendships based on goodness. So if you refuse to be friends with anyone unless you can have a friendship based on goodness, well, you're just not going to have very many friends. What's more, friendship based on goodness, or complete friendship, often starts as friendship based on pleasure or utility. So think about your own list of friends. Maybe some of these people started off as people whose company you just enjoyed. They just gave you pleasure to be around. And because you enjoyed each other's company so much, well, you spent a lot of time together and really got to know one another. And then your friendship deepened and became based on your mutual love of one another's characters. And the same thing can happen with utility friendships. But I want to add something that Aristotle and Plato don't really commit themselves to, which is that even if a utility friendship never evolves into a complete friendship, it can still be extremely meaningful. And sometimes its limitations are exactly what makes it able to play a powerful role in your life. So sometimes, when I talk about this with students, sometimes they think, well, maybe you really shouldn't be friends with someone just for the utility, that there's something wrong with this kind of relationship. Isn't this using somebody if you're friends with them based on utility? So I'm going to argue that if done right, a utility friendship isn't one in which the parties use one another. It's one in which the two parties benefit one another. And I'm going to anchor the argument in a personal example, but I hope it's one that some of you can relate to. So I went through a difficult experience a couple of years ago, and since none of my closest friends had been through the same experience, there was only so much that they could do to really help me through it. But I found a support group, and through the support group I was connected with another person who had been through the very same experience in the very same way. Now, this other person and I really didn't have anything else in common, and we didn't even really know very much about other aspects of one another's lives. But we knew exactly how the other person felt about this shared experience that we'd both been through. So we felt deep goodwill and love and gratitude toward one another because we could really help each other through the process of processing and healing from this experience. And we could do this even though we didn't really know each other very well. So after a year or so, when we were both feeling a lot better, we gradually and organically began to communicate less frequently. We were very, very different people with really different values and really different beliefs. And so the friendship was never going to be a complete friendship. But even though our contact eventually faded away, this was a really meaningful friendship. And I wonder if you've ever had a friendship like this, where you and the other person were able to help one another and felt deep goodwill toward one another because of this, even though you didn't develop what Aristotle would call a complete friendship. In any case, I think this shows that utility friendships can be very important and need not leave either friend feeling used. If done right, they can leave each friend feeling benefited and grateful. We're now at the last question of our Q&A. And this is a question that we may all be thinking about now more than ever since we're having to stay apart from our friends and many of our loved ones. And the question is, how does being apart from your friend affect the friendship? So Aristotle addresses this question in Nicomachean Ethics 8:5, and he says that friendship is a state that you and your friend both maintain by engaging in the activities of friendship, spending time together and doing good things for one another. So when you and your friend are separated and can't engage in the activities of friendship with one another, then what happens to the friendship? Aristotle says that you continue to be friends, but that you're not actively being friends to one another. And he argues that the state of friendship can last for a while, quite a while actually, without friendship activities, but that if the separation lasts long enough, then the friendship will probably fade. Of course, in Aristotle's time, being separated by distance meant being unable to engage in friendship activities. We now have all sorts of ways to do things with friends, even when you're physically separated. They might not be the same things that you used to do. You can't go hiking with your friend or even have coffee together right now. But as long as you continue to talk, spend time, and do things together, even if only virtually, then at least according to Aristotle's model, the friendship will continue. So if you like, take one more look at that list of friends that you made earlier. And if you like, consider today engaging in a friendship activity with each of these people. Thanks for listening. I hope you found something in these ancient ideas that speaks to you. One of the things that I find really wonderful about reading Plato and Aristotle is that they do speak to me, even though I live in a world so different from theirs that they could hardly have imagined it. And whether this means that Plato and Aristotle were visionaries, or that there are some questions that are always going to be of concern to us as human beings, or maybe even somehow both, I'll let you decide. Take care.